So after week 2, gents, I stood in the press box at Lambeau Field with Matthew Collard, and we were doing a podcast after Vikings Packers. And I announced at that point in time, Vikings fans, you need to pull back your expectations. And that in my mind, this is a team that you should be happy if they make the playoffs. But all of this talk that we had started with Kirk Cousins in 2018 when he was signed about being potentially offensively the final piece to a Super Bowl puzzle, and the defense at that time we all thought was outstanding, and at that time it probably was. I said you need to pull back your expectations and you need to be happy if they make the playoffs, because after that game, with the way that Cousins had played and that team had played in giving up the first 21 points, I did not see a path to say NFC title game team and potential Super Bowl.
Okay.
I have not rescinded that statement, and I'm not going to unless the Vikings win tonight. Tonight to me is that big, because
so what are you declaring?
I declared that you should be happy if this team makes the playoffs. That's what I said after week 2.
Okay.
When this team fell to 1-1 with a loss in a game that they should have won in my mind, and come back from 21-0 down in Green Bay.
They're in the playoffs, by the way.
They are. Exactly.
They're just to set the scene, they're 2 games up on the Rams, and the Rams still have to play the 49ers and I believe the Seahawks.
But my point at that time was be happy if they're a playoff team. Don't expect more. And I'm not going to change that statement unless this team wins tonight. Because if this team wins tonight, then they have turned, in my mind, a definite corner. It's going to be, if you win in Seattle, I don't care how you win, it's impressive. All right? But presented with a similar opportunity in my mind against Matt Moore in Kansas City, they lost. And since the beginning of October, that's the only game in which Kirk Cousins, I thought, underperformed and disappointed. If you go into Seattle tonight and win, I declare you having the ability to play with the big boys, and you also give yourself, if you win tonight, a very good chance at a division title, which to make a real playoff run, I think you need. All right? So I will amend my statement, but I will only do it if the Vikings win tonight. If they don't, and it's disappointing, again, I'm going back to, you're right, Phil. They're a playoff team, but I'm not putting my expectations above that.
This game has very little downside to me because the math says you're in the playoffs. You know, right now there's basically 7 teams fighting for 6 playoff spots in the NFC. There's the NFC East is going to produce, I think, anyways, one playoff team.
This is the poster child for a new seeding process.
Yeah, so the NFC East, I don't know if it's going to be as bad as the NFC West like 10 years ago when by the way, it was a 7-9 Seahawks team that actually won a playoff game against
Marshawn Lynch
because they got a home game.
Yes, because they played a home game,
which was
just hilarious.
Yes,
that Saints team was like 12-4.
So you're gonna get one playoff team from the NFC East. You're gonna get one playoff team from the NFC South because the Saints have already clinched the division. The Buccaneers are 5-7. Panthers are 5-7. So that's it.
Yep.
So you're gonna get a division winner and you're gonna get obviously 2 division winners, NFC North and West, and then you're gonna get 2 wild card teams. And right now, Packers, Vikings, Niners, Seahawks, Rams are the 5 teams fighting for those 4 playoff spots. And the Vikings have a much easier schedule and 2 games ahead of the Rams in the standings going forward. So they're in the playoffs, barring like losses to Detroit and a home loss or something to the Bears. Like they're in the playoffs. I think we have to declare what is the ultimate goal here. And I think it's get to the Super Bowl. That's right. I mean, that's what you've built here. Mike Zimmer's been around for a half a decade.
That's what the goal was, yes.
You got in his prime, highly paid quarterback.
And that's what my statement's based on.
Yep.
That goal, not just saying, we got to the playoffs, isn't that great?
Yep. And as PJ Fleck would say, let's not be afraid to be legendary around here, okay? Let's set those goals high. Super Bowl
and go
or
for it
bust.
On 4th down, okay.
And go for it on 4th and 2.
And don't use your timeouts unnecessarily.
Preserve your timeouts, yes. So if you lose this game, it doesn't shut the door for making a run in the playoffs entirely. It certainly doesn't shut the door for making the playoffs first. But if you win this game, it opens so many doors for you. It shows that you can build off of this road win at Dallas a few weeks ago with an even better road win. It shows you're built to beat good teams on the road outside of Dallas. It shows that you probably now punch on the level of like San Francisco. I think San Francisco and Baltimore are the 2 best teams in the NFL, and most people today would say that after their toe-to-toe matchup. But I think it puts you obviously above Seattle.
Yes.
It puts you on the level of everyone except maybe Baltimore and San Francisco. If you lose, now maybe you're second tier, third tier team. I think if you win this game tonight, it opens up so many doors for Kirk Cousins, for the Vikings, seeding wise. It opens up a first round bye potential, home playoff games, and validation that you can win in these situations.
I think this game, though, is enormous to me, because if you don't win and you go to the playoffs, I'm going to be thinking, okay, you might win a first round game. But there's in no way, shape, or form, if you lose tonight, am I going to sit here tomorrow and say, you know what, I really still see a path to the NFC title game? Because I won't. I won't. And if you look, Phil, there are certain check marks, right? Green Bay week 2, you could have come back. If you come back from 21 down in Lambeau Field, we're all saying, oh wow, that's impressive, right? If you go into KC, and yes, Mahomes didn't play in that game and Matt Moore did, but it's still a tough environment to play in, and that's a really well-coached, really good team. If you win that game, I'm saying to myself, that's really impressive. Dallas, I'll still give you, all right? So is Dallas more of a dumpster fire than I thought back then? Yes, they are. But I'm not going to take away from a victory in Dallas, because that is or can be a tough place to play. So tonight, to me, sets up a game where I can say, wow, that's impressive. And now, to your point, and you're exactly right, to your point, you've now moved up to that upper echelon in the conference of, you at least are in the discussion with those teams. I also think a division title is incredibly important. If you go in as a wild card playoff team, you're going to have to go on the road. It gets tougher.
Yeah.
And if you look at the remaining schedule of the Vikings and the Packers, common sense says the Packers and Vikings are going to win all of their remaining games except the one game where they play each other here, which I will give the Vikings will win, all right? But if they end the season tied, tiebreaker 1 is head-to-head. It's going to be 1-1. Tiebreaker 2 is division record.
Yeah.
Packers are going to win. I think tonight is a monumental game if the goal is this Vikings team has legitimate championship aspirations and can be taken seriously.
651-646-8255. Phone line's always open on Vikings Ventline. Mackie in for Danny. Danny's been coughing up some sort of phlegm the last few days, and he's taken a day. He's
not feeling well.
He's had a rough stretch, but we'll get him back in the mix here this week. Here's another scenario to throw by you. All right, go down this path with me.
Mm-hmm.
Kirk Cousins, and there's a wonderful article from Matthew Collar, Kirk Cousins versus the critics, basically, and kind of outlining what the national talking heads were saying about him and local talking heads, like idiots like us,
all of us,
after week 4. Kirk Cousins was a disaster the first 4 weeks of the season. I think he lost the Packers game for the Vikings and that game against Chicago. There's a lot of other things that weren't competitive for the Vikings, but he was not competitive. Since that week 4 loss to the Bears, Kirk Cousins has been one of the 3 or 4 best quarterbacks in the NFL. In a lot of different measurements, he's been the best quarterback in the NFL. Like, I'll still take Lamar Jackson and I'll still take Deshaun Watson and stuff, but he's in that mix since week 4 in that MVP conversation. And he has wins in primetime on the road against a Dallas team that has a really good roster, some bad coaching, but that's a good win at Dallas.
I agree completely, yes.
He had a big fourth quarter comeback win against the Broncos, down 20-0 at the half. What if he adds to those 2 big performances?
Yep.
A 275, 300-yard game tonight, 2-3 touchdowns, no turnovers, and the Vikings beat the Seahawks. If he is a catalyst and a driving force for a road win on Monday night against one of the best teams in the NFL, what will that do for you in terms of
very important.
Your thoughts on Kirk Cousins?
Very important. The last significant hurdle here in 2019 when it comes to Kirk Cousins for me is this: 0-7 on Monday Night Football, which 7 games is a lot of games to lose. I know that if you go back, they probably are not all on Kirk, but there have to be a few that are on Kirk. And so he's beaten Washington, which I understand stinks, primetime game. He beat Dallas at Dallas, Sunday night game. That's impressive to me. But I think for more importantly than me or you, I think the conversation actually goes back into the mind of Kirk as well. Because I think the way that Kirk thinks and the fact that he puts a rock in a canister every day as he gets closer to his untimely demise.
It's every month, Joe.
Every month.
He's not that crazy. It's not every day.
But think about
and he takes a rock out. He doesn't
Okay,
put one in.
whatever
He takes a rock out for every month. He's
whatever
alive.
he does, what I'm trying to tell you.
He's counting down.
Whatever he does, what I'm trying to tell you is that Kirk Cousins is clearly in Kirk's own head. And I think this began to flip after Chicago when it's pretty clear somebody got to him and said, dude, have some fun, man. You're playing a sport. This is not life and death. And he turned a corner there. And there have been consistently, I think, throughout the course of this year, when it comes to Kirk Cousins, corners turned. And I think those are very important in Kirk's mind. So if you go in and put up the statistics that you just said in Seattle tonight and win that game, I'm impressed. You're impressed. More importantly, I think Kirk is like, oh yeah, I did that.
Yeah, like
it's a very psychological game.
I think one of the themes that you and I have had in the 6 or 7 years we've been doing radio together too is like just reference points are really important. And when you're in a situation as a coach or a player, quarterback, pitcher, whatever it may be. I mean, Jose Barrios, we've talked about this with him. One of my worries about the Gophers, just to bring this full circle here, one of my worries about the Gophers before that Wisconsin game was, do they have enough reference points? Does PJ Fleck have enough reference points? Does Tanner Morgan have enough reference points to be able to absorb all of the different emotions and things you're going to be like? Game day is in town. The weather is crappy. Wisconsin's a good team. They are offended by what you've done with the Axe. Absorb all these things and keep a pulse that doesn't flutter through your neck, right?
Absolutely.
And I think the last couple of games for Kirk, I think there's been some validation and some reference points of, I know I'm a good quarterback. I know I can throw the deep ball. I know that I make $30 million and like I'm one of the 20 best in the world. But I also know that there's these lingering things out there, whether they're true or not, they exist. Primetime, road, good teams, fourth quarter comebacks, all these things. I think the more he checks those boxes, and this would be a huge one, obviously, in Seattle tonight, I think it helps him get to that next level more permanently.
Yes.
It doesn't mean like if they win that game against Seattle tonight and he is a driving force and he puts up the yardage and the touchdowns and maybe it's a fourth quarter comeback in Seattle. My God, the world would collapse if that happened.
That doesn't happen here.
If that happened, it doesn't mean that he's not going to have a clunker on Sunday night again, or like that it doesn't guarantee that they beat the Packers in the same fashion when the Packers come to US Bank Stadium.
Right.
But I think it just makes Kirk and Vikings fans and Mike Zimmer, it makes everyone feel like, okay, there's a path to a Super Bowl win here. Right?
Correct. And if you win tonight, that says to me that you might not be as good as the 49ers, but you've now put yourself in a discussion there. Right now, I say to myself, if you have to play San Francisco or the Saints in the Superdome, I think you're sunk. But prove me I'm wrong, right? And after week 2, I said, if this team makes the playoffs, be happy because that's them.
Do you think, let me ask you this.
They've been that team, but they can take a next step tonight.
Speaking of like what this game could open doors to, do you think the Vikings can beat San Francisco in a playoff game at San Francisco?
I cannot answer that question, and I'm dead serious until after I see what they do tonight.
I think
can't.
Right now.
No, I don't right now, but I could change that.
I think it's a really, really hard ask right now.
Against that defense?
Do I think the Vikings can beat the San Francisco 49ers at US Bank Stadium in a playoff game? Jimmy Garoppolo never having been in a spot like that before? Absolutely, I do. And if you win this game tonight, you stay one game behind San Francisco.
Right.
And then you start to compare the last 4 games of the season that the Vikings have, in which the Vikings, if they beat Seattle tonight, I think it's reasonable to expect the Vikings to go 3-1 minimum in their last 4 games, ideally 4-0.
I think they should go 4-0 at that point.
San Francisco's next 4 games.
Yep.
It's a meat grinder.
It is it's at New Orleans.
Yep.
Home against Atlanta. Home against the Rams, which are like the Rams might still be fighting for a playoff spot. And then at Seattle to end the season, probably for the division, right?
That's a good one.
So if San Francisco drops a game, if let's say San Francisco loses at New Orleans and at Seattle and they finish the season 12-4,
yep.
If you win tonight, it opens the door for you to have home field advantage throughout the NFC playoffs.
And to that point, if you do, the game is completely changed. Jimmy Garoppolo in this place, good luck, son.
Agreed. But Jimmy Garoppolo feeling good at home, grass surface, Vikings, like that. That's one of the biggest contrasting of all the things on the line here the next month or so. You got to win a bunch of games to even make it a conversation. But if you have to play at San Francisco as opposed to playing San Francisco at your house, that might be one of the widest gaps in terms of what you would expect to happen in that game.
Huge difference. Two places. And the second thing is, I have no interest in playing in this Superdome. It's an incredibly tough place to play. I don't care if Drew Brees is not Drew Brees still. If you think about that, going into that stadium and the noise in that place again is incredibly tough. But if you play them here, you can beat them.
Yeah. 651-646-8255. Vikings Ventline. Mackey in for Danny here. Judd on as usual. Matthew Collar's coming up in a few minutes too.
Yes.
To help preview all of this. Biggest game of the season for the Vikings tonight. John in Manhattan. Thanks for listening to Score North.
You're welcome, Phil. What's up, guys?
What's up, John?
Hey, Judd. So here's
that was insincere Judd right there. John,
no, John and I are so tight that it's just brief. Go ahead, John.
Yep. We're so tight, we almost hung out when Judd was in New York.
Oh, man.
So I just missed him.
Yep, just ships in the night. So here's my thing. They're going to lose tonight.
That's John in Manhattan, everyone. Thanks for the phone call.
Kirk Cousins is going to do his darndest, but it's just, after watching the Vikings come up short the Gophers come up short against Wisconsin, and, the Twins, it's still hurting me. I listened to Rewind last night because I had no, Sunday Score North to listen to, so I listened to the 163 Rewind.
Nice.
About that collapse in 2010 and the decade of Twins misery, and I hate to say it, but I got a terrible feeling that, we're just this is the season of just couldn't quite get over the hump for all Minnesota sports. So, I'd love for Kirk Cousins to prove me wrong. I called in last week and I was very optimistic, and Judd told me I needed to get back on the bottle. And, I'm not drunk, but I'm certainly pessimistic.
Thanks, John. You're never optimistic,
have you had a drink on this Monday morning yet?
No, but it is snowing for the first time, and I'm cold.
Yeah, I feel for you.
That was a very cheery call from our buddy John.
I feel really bad for you,
Thanks,
John. It's snowing. Okay, here's the difference, though. The Twins and Gophers are I think, hopefully, for their sake and our sake, are starting something. The Vikings are a different conversation here.
Yeah, they're in the middle of something.
And this was
not
built,
maybe wrapping something.
And this, yes, exactly. And this was built for that purpose. Like tonight's game is built. If the Gophers had kept it close against the Badgers on Saturday, I really would have said, it's tough, but you kept it close. My only real disappointment is you got waxed. Okay. When it comes to the Vikings, this is different. This is, you signed Kirk Cousins is now doing what we expected him to do, what we thought he could do.
Yes.
The disintegration of your defense bothers me. It certainly does. But this is still a team that is in a spot where we expect something. And that's why after week 2, when I said, man, playoffs, I guess, I was really disappointed. That was not Twins. It's like playoffs. It's great. Yeah, it's disappointing that you got swept by the Yankees. I understand that. But for the Vikings after week 2, I was disappointed in saying that because this was all supposed to be the culmination of can you make a Super Bowl run, not can you make the playoffs.
Yeah. This is going to be fun tonight. And you and I are going to be anchoring post-game Vikings Ventline too, I don't know, around 10:30 or so.
Do we have cots here?
Cots?
Cots, I might need a nap at some point in time.
Yeah, there's a rug right down there. There's
nice.
A towel for a pillow. It's a Twins rally towel.
I got that. Actually, I
don't think that's been washed
that
out.
giveaway. No, it has not. I can confirm it has not been because I brought it in here. Thank you.
I'm gonna say goodbye for a little while, and you're gonna get Matthew Collar on here next. And phone lines are open to Vikings Ventline 651-646-8255. It's Score North all in on Vikings and Gophers for the most part today. You can download the Score North Monday app. It is.
It's a Mackey
I'm on
Monday.
Every show today, baby.
Just sprinkled in throughout.
This is what happens when a couple guys get sick and one's coming back from vacation. You get all of the Phil Mackey experience, apparently.
Tonight, put your feet up. Get your popcorn ready. It's Monday Night Football, the biggest game of the season.
Just getting
Time on Manny Hill, and the Vikings getting set to play the Seattle Seahawks tonight. And a reminder to stay tuned for Vikings Ventline after the game, probably around 10:30 or so tonight. After the final whistle, as Mackie and Judd will take you through your reactions and your events, and you'll share your thoughts on how things go tonight. So we will see. Vikings will be without Adam Thielen tonight. Again, Thielen, of course, has not played since October 20th against the Detroit Lions at Ford Field. And here's what Mike Zimmer had to say last week about other players stepping up in number 19's absence.
We've had to use Irv Smith a little bit more. Olabisi, use the running backs a little bit more. We've had to adjust, but that's what you do. You have confidence in the other players that have been able to come in there and step up and do their job.
And those other guys that Zimmer just listed off, they're going to have to step up again tonight in Seattle. That is your Score North download. Now back to Vikings Ventline.
Thank you, sir. TCL Broadcast Studios, 651-646-8255 if you'd like to join the conversation. If you go to scorenorth.com right now, you can find a variety of very interesting and all well-written pieces, including a story, Kirk versus the Critics, which gets into Kirk Cousins against what all of the people said about Kirk early in the season, as Kirk was not playing well, but of course, since October started, he has been fantastic. And joining us now is the author of that fine piece, Matthew Collar. All right, Collar, what did you find as you researched and sat down and wrote this piece of Kirk versus his critics?
Well, I think there's two angles that I tried to address. One is how Kirk Cousins has handled the critics, because, I think that even though he is deserving of some of the criticism, which is the other part of the story, you're talking about a guy who really got smoked earlier this year, and he was deserving of it after the end of last season and a very poor start to this year, where, you go back to that Chicago game and he looks scared, he looks confused. It was that bad Kirk look that we have seen too many times every time they go to play a big game. And at that time, that was a big game against the Chicago Bears, and they walk out of there with 6 points against a team that turned out to be really not that good. And the national media really at that point, I think, turned on Kirk Cousins and started to go into the area of not even really being fair to Kirk Cousins, to saying things that aren't even really true about him and about him as a player. Colin Cowherd said he can't throw the ball down the field, which has never even been remotely true. He's always been good at throwing the ball down the field. But it was like they turned the heat up to 11 on Cousins, and the way that he's dealt with it and responded is by being one of the best quarterbacks in the entire NFL and doing things that he was always, said to not be able to do, to win a primetime game, to lead a comeback 2 weeks ago against the Denver Broncos. And it's been fascinating to see him bounce back in the face of all that heat. And then the other part of it is how much of it was over the top, how much of it was deserved. And when we looked at his win-loss record in the past, there were a lot of things that you could connect it to. I mean, he wasn't particularly good on third downs. He needed play action to help him out. He had a good supporting cast, but didn't come through in a lot of the biggest games. In fact, you go to every year of his career, and he didn't come through in the games that his team needed him the most. Playoff games, Week 17s with a chance to get into the playoffs. That has been his MO, and he has an opportunity to change that, and I think that really starts tonight. So it's not just that he's sort of proven he can succeed in the face of the pressure throughout the season after Week 4, but now tonight against Seattle and then beyond as we go down the stretch of the playoffs, he really has a chance to completely change the narrative around him that he can't step up at big times and he can't win.
So I think tonight is crucial, and there's a multitude of reasons for that. But I think one of the most important reasons why tonight's game is so huge is for the sake of what goes on between the ears of Kirk Cousins. And here's why. I don't know how much Kirk pays attention to what the critics say. I don't know how much he truly reads or hears stuff. Some guys say they don't, and it's BS, and some guys say they don't, and they are telling the truth. But when it comes to Cousins, when you think about how he's wired, right? When you think about how much he thinks about things, how he goes about his day-to-day life, there is no doubt in my mind that maybe the final, but certainly a very important checkpoint in Cousins' football existence right now is 0-7 on Monday nights. And I know that if you go through the totality of those games, you probably won't find that all the defeats are Kirk's fault. But I do think that if Kirk can go into Seattle and Kirk can play a really solid, good football game, and he wins there, that since the start of October, he has checked off boxes, right? He beat Washington in prime time. He beat Dallas. Nice win at Dallas in prime time. But he has yet to win on a Monday night. And as Kirk goes down this list of saying, I did that. Wow, that's great. For some guys, probably not important. I think in Kirk's existence as a football player, it's incredibly important, Matthew.
Yeah, I think it is. And one thing that Carson Palmer said when he was on the show that I quoted in the piece was, anyone is going to tell you that they don't hear it. Some guys will admit to it, but they're lying to you if they don't. At least some semblance of it. I mean, the entire national media can't be ripping you apart when you have NFL Network in the building at TCO Performance Center and you don't see it. Remember when Mitch Trubisky wanted to turn the TVs off in the building in Chicago?
Yeah.
Because he was tired of seeing it. Everybody knows what's being said about them. They have friends, they have siblings, they have wives, they have whatever. You know, people are telling them what's getting said about them, even if they're not hearing it themselves. So Kirk's ability to block that out and turn things around, I think overall is just very impressive. Now, to your point about Monday Night Football, I think there's a few things at play here. I mean, number one is beat an actually good team.
Mm-hmm.
Like now, this schedule looks terrible. We thought this was going to be a really hard schedule for the Vikings. Oh my gosh, we were completely wrong. I mean, this is about as easy of a schedule as you could ever get for the Vikings. Their best win is against the two 500 teams, Oakland and Dallas. Like, I mean, those were the best wins that they have. Now, the Eagles win doesn't look any good because the Eagles just lost to the Miami Dolphins, and they look like a joke.
Yep.
How about Denver? The guy that almost beat them, they benched him, right?
Well, and how about Dallas? It's still a nice win, Dallas is, but still, I mean, Dallas has now officially declared itself as pretty much a franchise dumpster fire because of its head coach.
Right, exactly. And there's no asterisk next to that. You have a Super Bowl winning coach. You have a probably Hall of Fame quarterback in Russell Wilson. I mean, this is not a team that's a joke. And also, I would say Seattle's defense has improved by adding Quadre Diggs from the Detroit Lions. And I would say it's not just Kirk's confidence, because I think he believes in himself quite a bit, maybe more than anybody else. I think it's really the confidence of everyone around him. It's the confidence of the organization. It's the confidence of the players on the team. I mean, the faces of the guys last year in Seattle when he turned around and threw the ball backwards to Latavius Murray. I know that it's you know, we make fun of that particular play quite a bit, but to me it was like the signature moment of everything that went wrong with 2018 with Kirk Cousins choking in big moments, because he just panicked on that play. And then, you know, the microphones pick up Adam Thielen saying, you know, something like, I've been open all night or whatever it is. I mean, we saw that frustration really start to build in Seattle because I think everybody looked around and said, the quarterback just isn't doing his job here in a game that we should have won. If that happens again tonight, then I think there will be a lot of questions still about Cousins in these big games. If he has a great night today and lights it up and beats Russell Wilson, if you're on that team, no matter who you are, from the left tackle to the star receiver to, you know, Everson Griffin, whoever you are, you're going to feel like, wow, we can really do this with this guy.
And I think tonight is a must-win game for the Vikings, and here's why. If you logically look, as you just talked about, Matthew, the remaining schedules for the Packers and Vikings, both of those teams, starting with Packers game on Sunday and the Vikings game on Sunday, should win every game they play except for the game where they're going to play each other at US Bank Stadium. And if that's the case, then, and the Vikings lose tonight, I think the best that can happen would be that the teams would tie record-wise. Your head-to-head would then be 1-1, and it would then default to tiebreaker 2, which is the division record, which at that point in time, the Packers win. And I think the Vikings as a wild card team, they win a game, maybe they don't. But if they win tonight, I think it declares them as being in the conversation with potentially the top teams into the conference, which in my mind, they have not been. And secondary, too, it gives them a chance at more home field. It sets them up to make a potential Super Bowl run. Qualifying as a wild card to me means you're a playoff team. But when those playoffs start, Matthew, I will not be saying to myself, you know what I expect from the Vikings? A Super Bowl run.
So not only that, but it also gives you an opportunity, even if Green Bay holds tight with you and you end up with the same record with them. But beating Seattle head-to-head gives you a chance to get that number 5 seed potentially, which would mean going to Dallas. And that would be amazing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah.
okay, I know the system is a disaster and it's stupid and it needs to be changed. Dallas might be an 8-8 team hosting a playoff game, but hey, if you're going to be on the wrong end of that stick, you certainly want to play Dallas. Like, they're a talented team with a coach that is a complete joke in my mind, and you can go down there and easily beat them again, I think. If you end up having to go to Lambeau, I think the Vikings are a better team than the Green Bay Packers, but going to Lambeau, we saw what happened last time. That one, I think, would be a very tough task, especially with the way that this Vikings defense sometimes plays on the road on grass for whatever reason. I don't have a great explanation for that. But also the defense of the Packers seems to play a lot better at Lambeau. And yes, I'll buy into some of the conspiracy theory about the referees at Lambeau Field as well. So that's not something you want. That does absolutely make this game huge. The other part of it too, if you lose, now Chicago's playing a little better, and they should still be scary to you. Chicago has beaten Kirk Cousins all 3 times. That's who you're playing in Week 17. And the Rams got a win yesterday, which if the Vikings lose, I saw this today, if the Vikings lose tonight, the Rams playoff chances all of a sudden go up to like 33%. And all of a sudden, even though we think they're a disaster, they're on the outside with still a chance at, making up some of that ground and getting ahead of the Vikings. That door ends up being open by one upset, say in Week 17. So this thing is, I think, one of the biggest swing games that I can remember of how we're going to feel about this team and what it means for the playoff position.
So I'm going to tell you one thing that might sound crazy, but I believe it to be absolutely true. Unless it was the slightest of hamstring strains in the history of hamstring strains, the one thing I'm not doing tonight is playing Harrison Smith.
Well,
I can't
they're
do it.
0 for 2 in hamstring handling over the last 2 years. Dalvin Cook's season was ruined last year by trying to put him on a pitch count. They play him, then they don't play him. Where does that sound familiar? Oh, look, with Adam Thielen. I remember being in Chicago and telling you on the phone, on the Purple Podcast, after the game, I think they really made a huge mistake by putting out Adam Thielen in that Kansas City game. And it certainly makes you question whether it was Thielen's call entirely or whether it was the staff. It's hard to say what goes on behind the scenes, but here's what I know. Huge mistake to put Adam Thielen out there. And if they do the same thing with Harrison Smith, you're taking that risk of having him hurt the hamstring again and then being without him down the stretch. And here's the thing. Find me another team with 4 quality safeties. I don't think you can. I mean, if it's Jaron Kearse, we saw how he played against Denver. I really like how he's played despite his faux pas off the field. I think he's had a very good season. We know Anthony Harris is a good player. And then, Andrew Sadejo has been a reliable player for the Vikings since, he became a starter under Mike Zimmer earlier in his career. So, if they have to sit Harrison Smith, there was once upon a time where I would have said that is a death knell to any chances to win. I don't believe that anymore. I think you can win without him. But here would be the counterpoint, Judd. It's Russell Wilson. I mean, that makes things a lot harder.
But you can't.
This is not Brandon Allen.
But if Smith goes out there and tweaks it, his season's probably done, at least until the playoffs at the earliest, right? So I can't do that.
I agree.
I just think that's suicide.
That it's risky. It's not every hamstring is the same. It's very hard to say from the outside perspective to know how close he is. But the fact that he, was limited in practice and things like that, that would make you want to err on the side of caution. But it's also a huge game, though. I mean, this isn't.
I know.
Like, oh well, it's the Lions and it's David Blau and whatever. Let's sit him out. And this is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL over the last decade.
Last thing. Do you think that Zim has some type of tweak or change in the pass D that, if not fixes things, helps things?
I think that's possible, but it's also really hard to do when I'm not sure that it's scheme that's been the problem. I don't think it really has been at all. I think it's been wide receivers just beating Xavier Rhodes and Trey Waynes. And Rhodes talked about being in decent coverage a lot of times, and he's not even wrong, but just grabbing guys, committing penalties, and not being able to play the ball like he used to. I think probably because his explosiveness just isn't the same. And I don't know what you're supposed to do as Mike Zimmer. Now, one thing you could try would be to, mess with Russell Wilson a little bit with blitzes, but this shouldn't surprise you. He's one of the best in the NFL against blitzes. He's one of the best in the NFL getting the ball out quickly. That's where people don't give him the credit he deserves, is that if you even took away scrambling entirely from Russell Wilson, he's still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And so there isn't an easy way to beat him. I think they're probably going to do a lot of the same. Personally, I would try to rotate based on matchups.
Yep.
So if you have a bigger receiver like DK Metcalf, I want Xavier Rhodes on him. If you've got a smaller receiver like Tyler Lockett, I might want Mike Hughes on him. I might want Mackenzie Alexander on him, no matter where he goes. That's the best I can come up with. But, Zimmer wouldn't really say. He said they wanted to get back to fundamentals.
Oh, he's not going
like that.
He's not going to tell us, yeah.
Right, of course he's not. It will be interesting, though. I go back to what he said after Dallas, where he said they tried every coverage under the sun and still couldn't stop Dak Prescott that night. I wouldn't be surprised if we see something very similar, where it all comes down to how you play in the red zone.
J-Ron Curse as well. And here is an idea, because this league is so screwed up right now. Have J-Ron Curse away from the actual passes. So before the ball is out of Wilson's hand, run more picks and just below the surface stuff that might get flagged, but take your chances. Take your chance, because the league is so goofed up on this rule right now that if you don't grab a guy as he's going to get the ball, there's now, I think, a 50-50 chance that you can get away with stuff.
Yeah, they don't know what to call, and
exactly.
We saw that yesterday, and I think the Los Angeles Chargers have a pretty good beef for their wide receiver running into the corner, falling down, and then they get a game-winning field goal out of it. That nothing has changed there. I mean, it worked for Seattle for years. Grab the receivers; they can't call everything.
Exactly,
that's what they're going to do. But also Xavier Rhodes, though, target on his back with that stuff.
Oh, he can't do it. It's got to be somebody else. Got to be somebody else.
Yeah, that's right.
Not 29.
Because every ref in the world knows about Xavier Rhodes now.
All right, sir. Thanks much. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
All right.
Yep.
That, of course, Matthew Collar, who you can hear on Purple Daily at 2 o'clock this afternoon. He'll be on from 2 to 4. And as I said, check out his article right now that you can find, scorenorth.com. Kirk versus the critics, an in-depth look at all the criticism that Kirk Cousins got early in the season and how that has changed. Come back and wrap things up on Ventline after this.
Listen to Score North on the Score North mobile app, and you could win prizes. The Score North mobile